We're doing things a little differently this week from what we've done in the past. We're certainly putting out our audio, but we're also going to put out a video version of this website, uh, of this podcast. There we go. And we will have this on YouTube. So we're going to be talking about some things and we're going to be holding them up. So we're also going to do some description. So if you're listening on as a podcast, you should be okay. But if you want to get the full the full experience, we will have it on our YouTube channel. Ethan, do we have a YouTube channel yet?
No, but I'll make one.
Okay, so we'll make one. We'll put it in the show notes what our YouTube channel is.
Like and subscribe.
Okay, so I have a suggestion: is that while we're looking at pictures, we could describe what we're seeing a little bit as we talk, just to keep the podcast from being a complete snooze.
Right. Sure. Absolutely. So this is a little bit before the show. So let's go ahead and we're gonna start the show, but I'm going to ask a question. There was a band. I grew up in Minneapolis, and I grew up in the Minneapolis sound era. And there was a band called The Replacements, and The Replacements had this song called "Sick of That Song." Okay, and it was basically the whole concept of when you are a band, when you're playing songs over and over, you get sick of that song. And every once in a while, as a photographer, I get sick of that camera. I get sick of that format. I get sick of that film. I get sick of the subject matter. So what do you guys do? Ethan, how do you approach that when you get sick of a camera or a film or something like along those lines?
Yeah, I got a lot of cameras. I just do what I want. Yeah. I work for myself, man.
Yeah.
So I think about it like I get sick of a project, right? I'm a one-track mind type of guy. And so, I pretty much let my life fall apart. I don't shower for 3 weeks, and I just sit here and program or whatever that I'm working on. And hopefully I won't get sick of it before I actually complete it and release a product. But pretty often I get sick of it, and it winds up in a box of uncompleted prototypes. I've made myself a rule right now that I can't buy a Volkswagen-sized laser cutter until I release this project that I'm working on now, because if I do buy a laser cutter, I know that I'm going to have a half-finished laser cutter and a half-finished product, and nothing will get done. It's like sort of one-track mindedness, which is a strength sometimes, but a real weakness.
Okay, there's a problem with that. Is I'm going to need your laser cutter for my next project. So please finish the current mystery project that I think is going to sell $1 billion worth. But yeah, Nick, how do you do that? How do you deal with that?
Well, so when I don't usually get sick of projects, but what happens is I get too many going at once, and you just have to put some of them on the shelf and wait for them to mature and come back to the front. That's usually, I'm not so much tired of projects as distracted by new ones.
Well, rather than projects, what about cameras? What do you do when it's a camera that you've been shooting too much of there, or you've been shooting too much of that film, you've been shooting too much of that lens, and it's like, what do you do from a photography standpoint?
Well, since it's sort of like Ethan, there's just plenty more where that came from, so that's not really an issue either.
Right.
I find that it's not so, the camera's just, it's like a big pile of tools. You just pick up the right one for the project. I'm not so much I don't think I start with cameras. The only time that I start with cameras is when I'm building and designing them, and then it's a matter of testing it and finding out what it can do. But after I figured that out, it's just another hammer on the hammer rack, and you just pull it out when you need it.
A bag of hammers? You have a bag of hammers there, Nick? Yeah. Okay.
I do.
So
I keep a bag of hammers in my truck.
Yes. So here, I'm going to tell you what I've essentially for the last 6 months shot pretty much nothing but the Kraken, and I love it. I love the results, and the thing though is I'm a little bit burned out on it, right? So I have a new project that I'm going to be talking about a little bit later today. It's still in the concept phase. So I want ideas from you guys, but I also have decided that I'm going to choose one 35 millimeter camera to shoot, and that's going to be my Bessa R3M, right? And I'm going to shoot one digital, and that's an X Pro. I am going to shoot one 4x5, and that's my tower, which is what is it? What is it, Ethan? The tower is a Bush Pressman D. There we go. And then my one medium format is going to be a 645 version of the Kraken. So I'm trying to limit to that. Now, I will say that I've also grabbed my Holgas with the Holga masks, and I'm going to start producing some work. And I think that is kind of separate because it's not straight photography. It is, it's interpretive photography as opposed to much more representational photography. So it's a special effects camera, right? So I'm going to try to limit myself to those 4 cameras plus the special effects cameras, and see if that can focus my brain. Now, the other thing is I also have a 4x5 pinhole cam in there. So, I'm talking about limiting myself, and I'm now at 7 cameras or 6 cameras or something. But still is a limitation. I'm putting myself, I'm pulling myself out of the, I can shoot anything from the stables.
I kind of understand what you're talking about. It sounds like soft focus, but sure.
Soft focus? What do you mean by that?
You said you wanted to focus your mind, but you got 6 really different machines there. It's
sure, absolutely. And really, actually, my primary camera right now is the Bush Pressman. I'm really doing a lot of fun stuff with X-ray film and paper negatives and paper positives and stuff like that. So
yeah, I noticed that. It looks really good. I've seen a lot of good stuff appearing on your feeds. And one thing, I'm jealous of that look down viewfinder. That's something that I really like for a rear ground glass. Yeah. I like getting the camera down low, and it's hard to, I guess I need to get a little stool, carry a little folding stool around so I can, be a little more comfortable.
I just have it on a, what is essentially about a 3.5, 4 foot tripod. And so I am getting a slightly different angle than what you normally get out of a 4x5, a medium format camera. And Ethan is just itching because he hates that angle finder. Let me go get the angle finder so everybody can see it, since we're doing that.
Okay, but let's take a time note. Or not. Now we're going to have a minute of dead air here. This episode is brought to you by the Bush Pressman Model D.
We're learning, and idea was the guys were to vamp. You needed to vamp. So let's leave that in. Let's not take that out.
And when you hold that up, hold still, please.
Yeah, this is the angled finder on the Bush Pressman D, which is the tower press. You essentially look down and you get the image. It's flipped vertically, so so it's right reading vertically, but it's flipped horizontally. It's like looking through any waist level finder. But the advantage of it, the thing that I think that is the greatest thing, is that it is a light baffle, or I mean not baffle, but it's a light tight space, so it makes it easier to frame, easier to focus, and you're not under a tarp. And I hate being under that tarp.
I think the greatest part about it is that you could have sold that thing on eBay for as much as you paid for the entire camera and had a free camera without that annoying angle finder on it.
Or, my next 4x5 camera that I buy, I'm going to buy one of these and put it on there. So, Ethan, we know you have great hate for that, but that's okay.
I think what you need to do is you need to put a little bit of a little raft under that camera and wade into the swamp, because you'll be able to shoot at water level, but with that little eye finder thing while you're wading in deep water. It's great.
I was actually yesterday I was in the swamp right across the street from my house. Some neighbors. There's a creek that runs behind the houses across the street. And it's we get about I don't know, on a normal day we get maybe 10 inches of tide, and we were building a walkway and a platform to a tree house he's building for his kids. So I was out there in the swamp all day yesterday. And I didn't bring this, but I did bring my 4x5 pinhole. So that was what I was doing. What do you guys think? Should we start the Homemade Camera Podcast?
Yeah. Got some time to get started on it. This thing is my attempt to get a large, basically what I wanted was a camera with a shutter in it that would allow me to use system lenses for medium format photography. And what I got here is, I think, might be easiest to show pictures, but this is the finished product. Well, not finished, it's a work in progress, but it's got a cold shoe on the top, a lens board, which is set the correct distance from the film plane. The back is a graph lock back, which has a ground glass, and it can be removed and replaced with roll film holders. Got a tripod mount on the bottom. And because it's a speed graphic, it has a focal plane shutter, which gives you a 30th, a 60th, 120th, 250th, 500th, and 1,000th of a second, as well as T. I don't have a way to get a cable release on this. There's a trigger built into it. It's kind of a cool system. Once you get the hang of it, it's easy to use. You just wind it up to the right number appears and then press the trigger.
So when you were building that, you had to cut down that box. You cut it. It has I don't know what the depth of that box was, but it looked to me like it was about 150 millimeters. Am I right?
Yeah. So let me put up some pictures. See how this works. Okay.
Hey, Nick, before you put up some pictures, can I see how you hold that when you're actually using it in your hand? Are you triggering it with your pinky finger, or are you holding it like above and using your index?
Okay. Why isn't this showing me the screen? There we go. So when I first set it up, I set it up for a left-handed grip like this. Okay.
Of course you did.
Yeah, because that's what I like. And it put my index finger up here where I could press it, right?
So you're essentially holding the camera upside down for that.
That's what I was doing, but
yeah,
I ended up having to switch it to a right-hand grip because the graph lock back on this camera isn't symmetrical, and I couldn't flip it over. And what was happening is that the dark slide and the film holders were getting in the way of the grip. So in order to preserve that graph lock back, and these backs aren't perfect, they're real handy because they work with these nice ground glass that come with the speed graphic. But the little hooks that are present in order to remove this ground glass and replace it with a roll film back, those little hooks get in the way of some of the newer RB backs, and it's nice to be able to use those. And I found out you can use them, but you have to ease the dark slide out a little bit, not too much, and then slide it in, and that's an annoyance. However, it was worth it to me to keep this because it's a nice back, a nice ground glass with a built-in shade. So what that just meant is I had to flip my lens mount over and turn the camera around. But that's part of why I build cameras the way I do. So this thing, basically I assembled the whole thing with gaffer tape the first time and a few bolts. And then I was able to test it and then rearrange everything until I got it where I wanted it before I started permanently gluing parts on. So now I hold it like this. So right hand grip, and that puts this button down in an awkward place where your little finger hits it. And I don't always like using it that way. So I'll change my grip like this to a diagonal grip so I can use my index finger.
You're frozen a little bit. So,
all right, let's try that again.
So, stop moving around. Let the MPEG compression catch up.
Stop what?
And he said stop moving around and then your video should catch up. Okay. Yeah, now we see you. Okay, we're good?
Okay, so with a right-hand grip like this, you're forced to trigger the shutter with your little finger, and it's awkward. So I'll switch my grip down like this and hold the camera low down. And it's one thing that's kind of nice about this camera design is I have this big kind of crude tombstone plate on the front, but it gives me a nice 3/4 of an inch flange to grip at all different places. And then I left this part of the original box on because that gave me a really good hand grip and also preserved this trigger, this built-in trigger.
Does this have a cable release anywhere?
No, it doesn't. Now I may have to rig something. The original camera used a link that went through to the bellows front standard area for a cable release. And that's all gone because I took all that apart to make this possible. And I'll show some pictures of what that looks like. But this isn't that hard to press. So I'm just going to have to figure out a lever system that will put enough power on a remote release to work this thing. That's just a detail. But you tend to run this camera at fairly high shutter speeds. It's its minimum is a 1/30th of a second. There are no slower speeds on the focal plane shutter. So with modern films, the way I'm going to use this for the most part is with high shutter speeds that allow me to just to use that button on there. It's fine.
Right. And it 6:9 400 speed film is grainless anyway, right?
Sure.
At most sizes.
Oh yeah.
So one of the things I want to say about this is he was for our podcast listeners. He was talking about it has a graph lock back, and in that graph lock back there is there is a slider at the top and a slider at the bottom that lock in the graph lock back, and then it's got the default item that sits in there is a ground glass. So it's got a little flip up. There's a little flip up window, or what am I trying to say? There's a flip up cover, and it's got fabric sides, and so it shades that ground glass viewing. So if you were to hold it upside down, it would be more like a seat tray on an airline. So it would be, it wouldn't do the shading at the top. Am I right on that, Nick?
Yeah, and I'm just realizing that my camera isn't functioning, and that's because we restarted the meeting, and I don't know how to switch camera yet. Okay, so I want to turn on the desktop viewer and show some pictures of how this thing was built, right? So let's see. Yeah, seems to require me to click a couple of things, and now is a little delay. Can you guys see the screen?
Now we can, yes.
Okay.
We were getting a little bit of an echo there.
All right, so this is what a speed graphic looks like when you take off the front door and all the bellows and focusing and front standard and all those connections completely removed. And I also...
Hey, Nick, do me a favor, maximize that screen.
Click the green
It will
button.
be better on YouTube.
Okay.
Great.
But now I don't have any controls. Oh, well. So what you see now is the camera stripped down to what I needed. But in order to see, there's no way for me to get to the next image.
Down arrow on your keyboard.
Okay, there we go. Then the next thing I did was cut back the leather that's glued onto these old mahogany cameras. And it was a good thing I did, because originally I was going to cut this all the way down to get the minimum possible register distance. And in theory, I could have used M42 lenses and gotten infinity focus. But I noticed these two brass pieces, and they are part of what holds the back of the camera on. So I didn't want to cut them. So I just decided, okay, this will be medium format only. I can still use Mamiya 645 lenses if I cut where this line is. So I did a careful measurement.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to ask what that measurement was. What
it actually was? I'll tell you a little bit later. It's
okay.
It gave me a distance to the film plane of about 59 millimeters, something like that. So a few millimeters less than the 63.3 millimeter flange back distance of Mamiya 645. So anyway, I made careful marks with a pencil and a ruler. And that's not necessarily the next picture, but for some reason it is. Yeah, let me go out of this full screen nonsense. There we go. Here we go. I can pick the right image now. Oh, it's not in there for some weird reason. Okay, that's strange. Here we go. This is what I want to show. This image here. So this was getting ready to cut. I used on the far right, can you see that fine-toothed back saw? I cut through the wood all the way around with that first, but there's a metal box inside these cameras, a thin sheet steel box, and this required me to go around again with a hacksaw. And the hacksaw cut through that black metal you can see on the inside. And I had a really good clean cut because it took my time. You know, I didn't take forever to do it. And notice I cut through and kept the side with the shutter mechanism intact. And a little corner broke off because of the way the grain was, but not that big a deal. And then the next stage here was to make a base plate, which I simply cut with a jigsaw and a drill out of a piece of 1/4-inch plywood. And I had already previously calculated that there would be, this cut was close enough to the shutter that I would be, or to the film plane, that I'd be able to add this 1/4-inch layer and a 1/16 of an inch thick aluminum plate and still have a little bit of room to fudge in the focus and get it accurate. So that's what I did. And the next thing that I did after that, yeah, you have a question? The next thing I did was create that plate. So this shows, oops, that wasn't what I wanted to do. This shows the plate after I screwed it on, and then I started using gaffer tape to black out the interior. because there's shiny stuff and bright white wood, and I just used gaffer tape to do all of that. And then the next stage after
why did you choose gaffer tape over Plasti-Seal or Plasti-Dip or
well, I don't
or
have
just
any
black spray paint?
I don't have any Plasti-Dip in the house, but also I really like gaffer tape because it sticks really well, but you can peel it back off and there's no gummy residue left behind. So if you want to keep reworking something, it's strong and long lasting, and it has a nice matte black surface. So it does everything you want it to, but it's always reversible. And I wanted to keep all this flexible till I really had made sure everything worked the way I wanted it to. Because this type of camera building is really, it's like exploratory surgery. It's not, you want to make a plan, but you also want to leave yourself open to change your mind a whole bunch of times. It's not like I can just print another speed graphic. I've got to, I want to make this one survive the surgery and live on to be a good camera.
I've got one that may head your way if you want to try another one. It doesn't have the Graph-Lock back. It has this spring back, but that might help you out. Actually, if you want to try another one.
That might be a plus. So I'll show you a little bit later. Okay. But what I recommend is that we replace that back with an RB67 rotating back, and those are easy to pick up as an individual
I've got 4
part.
of them.
Yeah, send that along with it, because the beauty of those is they work with all the RB backs perfectly, including the 645 and all the awkward ones, and they work with you're limited to 6x7. That's that's the only thing, but the so-called 6x9 backs are really only adding barely a centimeter to that. So it might be worth the trade-off to have a better back.
Right.
Anyway, that's a possible solution. Or you could get one of Ethan's 6x9 Graph-Lock backs, 3D printed one, and just you could print it up, and then we can screw that on the back of there, and that works with every different kind of film holder as well.
Yeah. The only problem is bungees getting the shot cord.
No, you don't. No. He's made one that has the normal Graph-Lock sliders, and it works with all the film backs. You don't need bungees. Right. Okay, so there's that stage, and then the next picture I want to show is sort of the crude early stages. You can see here that I hadn't really refined anything yet. I was experimenting, making sure I could get infinity focus and all that. Trying it out. This is when I had it upside down with a left-hand grip, and then I found out I couldn't just flip over the film holder, and that was kind of the end of that. So now we can go back to this view, and anyway, after my initial tests, I took the camera apart, fixed the parts the way I needed it to be a right-hand grip camera, put it all back together, and this is what it looks like now. I also started with this front plate being a, let's say, oversized by 3/4 of an inch on 3 sides. And that allowed me to do a couple different things. It gave me enough space for future, these are going to get bigger and bigger when I get to bigger lenses with longer registers. And I needed extra flange and plenty of space to mount lenses. And I also wanted the flange as a way to grip the camera, to hold on to it. Because one thing about box-shaped cameras is they can be annoying to hold on to, especially when they start to get unwieldy. Yeah?
What Nick has just shown is on the front of the camera is an aluminum plate that has some screw holes, and it basically bolts onto the front of the camera. Are you going to be replacing that whole plate when you change to different formats? Is that the idea? That's your mount?
Exactly. It's a lens board that's bolted onto the plywood flange that I attached to the front of the cut down box of the old Speed Graphic. And that lens board, in this case, this is the shortest register I can do with this camera, and that's perfect for Mamiya 645. And in fact, when I calculated the depths, I'll get into this later, but I used a tool that Ethan turned me on to, which is a digital micrometer. And I put that basically to measure the distance back to the ground glass, which is about where the film plane is. And I got this thing tweaked until I had a little less than a millimeter short of the distance I needed. And what that allowed me to do was to add layers of gaffer tape. It only took 2 layers to get the perfect infinity focus. So I purposely made the camera a little too short, and then I just built up that space between the aluminum plate and the plywood base plate with a little bit of tape.
And you heard it here first. Gaffer tape as a shim.
There you go.
Yes.
I mean, okay, so even in something like if you take apart like an old Leica or a Zorky or a Nikon, you'll often find like paper shims under the lens mount. Like that was done professionally.
Yep.
I think that's no worse than or no better than duct tape shims.
Yeah, so that technique worked really well. So in the future, I'll take another piece of the same 16 gauge aluminum, match up the holes, my bolt holes, 5 bolt holes, and I already have another one made, ready to go. And that one will have a bigger hole cut in it that is big enough to expose the entire film gate. And then I will add basically a box to that with a second lens board permanently attached to create the right register for this other system lens. And what I do for a bayonet is I take a short extension ring from that series of cameras, and I cut a hole in the middle of the aluminum lens board and just glue that extension ring in place as a bayonet mount, taking care to get it right side up so that I can read the focus scale and so forth on the lens. But this is...
Hey,
yeah.
I have a question. It's like a very minor detail, but something that I noticed when I'm looking at the camera. You're using square nuts to hold the lens board on. There's got to be a reason for that. What's up with that?
I love square nuts. And I also just happened to have some bolts that were the right size that had square nuts, to my delight, because I love square nuts. The camera's square. Everything on the camera is square. It's a square box. All the pieces of it are square, and I like that, the harmony of all the squares.
Yeah. I'll do that. I'll go with that.
You also, they're easier to tighten with sort of crude tools that you might have to use in the field, like, your jackknife or whatever, because you may not have the right hex wrench with you when you decide you want to change something. But I intend mostly to use this camera with one system or another, rather than to change that lens board all the time, because the idea is that I can use it as a Mamiya 645 camera, or I can put on an RB67 or a Pentax 67 front piece, and then just mount those lenses to it. Now, at this point I only have Mamiya 645 lenses, and the next system I'm playing with is I have one Bronica. The old Nikkor Bronicas made for the early SLRs. And that brings up a whole other issue. When you're looking at a camera like this, a lot of these newer system lenses have an auto stop down feature. And luckily, Mamiya 645 has the classic switch on the lens that lets you switch to manual so that it'll stop down, which you need it to do. There's no smart camera behind there adjusting the aperture for you when you fire the shutter. So you need to be able to stop it down. Now you can always rig a stop down lever somehow. So for instance, usually there's a little pin sticking out of the back of the lens, and if you slide it, it'll stop the aperture down to the set point. So you could always jury rig some sort of little remote stop down lever yourself, and that's what I'll have to do maybe with the Bronica lens, although I found that there is a built-in stop-down lever on one of their extension rings, so hopefully that's going to work. That would be great.
Hey, Nick, what are all the different lens systems that you're planning on using on this camera? And real quick, stop presenting so we can see your face, unless you're going to illustrate.
Sure. So how do I do that? Stop screen sharing. There we go. Now, is that working?
Yeah, and look at the camera.
Okay, so what we have going on here is this is my minimum size, and it's Mamiya 645, but that's one of the shortest medium format registers, if not the shortest. So I'm going to be able to use any system lens from there up that's worth using to cover up to 6x9. The Graph-Lock back on this camera can't take any bigger film size than that. So, I mean, of course, you could do the same thing with a full-size speed graphic and could put some humongous lenses on there. But the point of this is really to use medium format system lenses. So it'll be everything between, say, a Bronica, which is got a really long register, like over 100 millimeters, down to this 63 millimeter flange back distance of the Mamiya 645. So that's a pretty big range, and there are all kinds of lenses out there, all those Russian medium format lenses, which have many times the lenses from those old systems are superb, and the cameras themselves are really infuriating. So if you like this style of camera, if you like ground glass back, if you like point and shoot by scale focusing, then this camera opens up all those lenses as a possibility. And that's really what I was interested in. I wanted to use system lenses with bayonet mounts and kind of modern, a little bit more modern design on an old-fashioned ground glass camera that I could take, it's relatively lightweight. For instance, compared to an RB67, it's probably almost half the weight. So there's advantages to this camera.
I think that there's a space for a tilting and a shifting on something like this. And it could be, and I'm just thinking about movements that you would expect out of a large format camera. Because you have that
the original speed graphic has the tilts and the shifts, right?
Yeah, so the original speed graphic has very limited movements. It tilts back a few degrees, and it rises and falls and goes, and it shifts a little bit. And that's moderately useful. But with this camera, for instance, the Bronica lens that I have with 100 millimeters of distance, there's plenty of room for some bellows movement. And and I hope to be receiving in the mail a very, very cheap, the old macro bellows for that Bronica has full movements on the front standard, and it should mount right onto a lens board that I make for that camera. So I'm waiting till it gets here. And one of the cool things about that one is that you directly manually adjust the aperture right on there's an aperture control built into the front standard. So that overrides the auto stop down feature. And that's real handy.
Wait, so Nick, you have cut the bellows off of this camera, and yet you are still building another bellows system onto it.
Well, but it will only be on that particular lens board. So when I take that off, it's gone. So so there's no point in having bellows for the Mamiya 645 lens because it's too close. I could use a shift lens. They actually made a really nice shift lens for that camera, so that's an option. But the point of this is that bellows is an optional thing I could use with one particular lens system. I don't have to take it with me all the time, and I'm not sure whether I'll use it or not. When it gets here, I'll decide. But for some reason, KEH thought it was defective because it didn't have the adapter for going on the old Bronicas, but it'll mount perfectly fine on the newer style mount. So I have a feeling that they really underpriced this thing at $23.
Have you thought at all about using a Fuji GX series lens? They're very square.
You mean the ones from that super fancy all electronic camera?
Yeah.
So I don't know how much control I can exert. I haven't used those lenses, but if they're all electronic, it might be a problem.
A little Arduino here and there, but I mean, you can use them open. I was just thinking that they are big, square blocks. Aesthetically might be interesting.
Oh, right. Yeah, so anything's possible. I actually have the front standard and bellows from one of those cameras in my collection of stuff. I bought a broken one in order to get the that part. So I could mount that whole thing right onto its own lens board. I've already got everything I need to do that. The question is, will there be clearance for the focusing rails? That's the problem. A lot of these systems were designed to clamp on the bottom of a smaller camera than this, but it's just a matter of a little more Frankenstein work, and we can make any of this stuff happen. I'm not that excited about necessarily adding movements to the camera. What I really liked about that bellows focusing. So have you looked at Bronica stuff at all? I just discovered this. I didn't realize that these were so good for, let's see, here we go. These are really amazing lenses in a lot of ways, optically fantastic, made by Nikon. And the thing about them is that the helical and the lens are separate. And they have a bayonet mount so that you can take the lens out of the helical and just pop it in and out really easily. And that's kind of weird and fun. It's definitely a really cool feature. The only thing is it adds another level of complexity. But the way I'm looking at it, I would mount that helical permanently into a lens board, and then so you can see, there we are. If this helical is mounted permanently into a lens board, then you just change this part, and you can use all the different Bronica lenses on that board.
The reason why they did that is there were a couple of lenses that would not fit into their regular helicals. And so they made some, I think they're like super wide ones. I forget exactly what it is.
Well, but the big telephotos, yeah.
It was the big telephoto, so it was the other end of the focal range. So, like, I have a 50 and a 75 for my Bronica ECTL, and they are, I think it's a great system, and it's a smooth system, and it's a durable system. I mean, I can imagine in 100 years that system, that focusing system would work. Now, Ethan, nobody can see you shake your head if you're not also talking.
Yeah, I've bought and sold dozens of those, and they were almost always all jammed up with dead shutters. I think they are not reliable. I'm a fan of the newer Bronica stuff, the ETR series, the SQ, even like the GS stuff.
Yeah, but here's the point. Those old... your sound is getting swallowed by the internet.
Oh, I have nothing more to say.
Okay.
I'm not a big fan of those cameras.
Right. So that's where this camera comes in, because the beautiful old manual lenses from those Bronicas, when the Bronicas jam up, the lenses have nowhere to live and nowhere to shoot, but you can go on this camera and have a new life.
And that shutter is totally serviceable, right? You could tear that whole camera down to every single piece in about 2 or 3 hours if you haven't done it before. Clean and lube the shutter, put it back together, maybe put a new curtain on it. Like, it's that I am way more of a fan of Nick's camera than those older Bronicas, even though they got nice lenses.
Yeah, so that's part of the whole point of this camera, is that there are many lens systems that are sort of languishing, and they're going cheap because the cameras were crap and are wearing out. And this is a really good solution to that, is this sort of universal shutter body. And it's what we've been looking for. We've been looking for a shutter to use all those system lenses that don't have a built-in shutter. This is one solution to that. Now, it would be possible to create an even shorter register and start getting it into the 35 millimeter. But I'm inclined, instead of cutting up these beautiful cameras, this one was broken, by the way. It was a pretty defective camera. I didn't feel bad about sawing it up. But in the future, what I'd like to do is to basically knock off the old Speed Graphic focal plane shutter, because it's very simple and very durable, and it performs really quite well. And they seem to hold up very well, too. I have another one that's in the 3x4 oddball format, and that has a very long bellows on it, and I'm going to keep that intact and use it for... I can mount Bronica lenses on that camera, and then you have basically a macro camera, because it the bellows cranks way out there, and you can get full range from infinity to macro with just one camera, which is kind of cool. So I'm hoping. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, I'm hoping to convince Ethan to work on building our own focal plane shutter, because these very simple, old-fashioned ones, I think, really could do a lot to open up our camera possibilities.
I was just going to say that those old Bronica lenses, I'm looking at one right now, the 75 millimeter 2.8 are $54. It has $25 worth of shipping, so it's a $75 lens.
Yep.
So you're paying $1 a millimeter for that one. And it is I have to say that may be one of the most beautiful lenses all through the range of apertures that I've ever shot.
It's a Nikkor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Nikkor. Yeah.
It's a really, really special lens, and as proof of that, it's one of Perry G's favorite lenses. So that says something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the point in many ways of this camera design, is to bring all these sort of oddball, left out, wallflower lenses back into use. And then you do have to like this style of camera. I'm sure a person could figure out ways to make it, slicker, but I like the very simple, you're either committed to scale focus, or you're using ground glass and being and taking your time to set up the shot and really get it the way you want. I like to work that way. I like to either be very present and take my time, or if I'm in a hurry, don't screw around. Just preset everything and just concentrate on composing. So for me, a camera that only does those two extremes makes a lot of sense.
I want your advice, guys. I have decided, okay, first of all, let's back up a little. I've been shooting a lot of X-ray film. I bought 100 sheets of blue X-ray film that cost me $25 shipped. So that when you cut it down to 4x5, that's 12 cents a sheet. Or is it 6 cents a sheet? You get 400 for 25. Yeah. Okay. So it's some real cheap thing. And I've always wanted a 4x10 camera. Once again, panorama, working that panorama zone.
That's in feet, right?
Say that again.
That's in 4x10 feet?
4x10 feet. Yeah, exactly. No, I want it to move. I mean, I don't need it to have a transmission and an engine. I want it to be powered by my feet. So yeah, no, 4 inches by 10 inches. And I'm in the concept stage. So I want to talk about what it would take to really make that camera into the camera that I want it to be. And so we're going to talk a little bit about lenses later on. I know Nick have a suggestion for me on lenses, but I feel like what I need to do is start off with the film holder. And because that's going to be, I want it to be a film holder situation as opposed to a one shot. A one shot is just a box. I can go out in the backyard and build that today. Well, I've got some errands to do. Tomorrow I could do it. But the idea is I've got that. I want to do a film holder. So Ethan, I want to talk to you about what the specifications are that I have to figure out for laser cut plastic for the film holder. So okay, so my first question is for opaque. What is it you cut? Lexan poly acrylic. Okay, so what is that size? Nick, do you have?
Nick's got a question or an answer.
Yeah,
well, I'm gonna take you in a different direction, but you for the fun of it, look at real hard at 4x5 holders and try and imagine grafting two together.
Right. Yeah, you could do that, and then you get a gap. I have the 4x10 where you've got two film holders butted up together, but there's a significant gap between.
No, I want you to do surgery, and I want you to actually graft them together to create a 4x10 holder.
No,
so yeah,
I
sure.
don't. That's not what I want. I know. There's some logic to that. But then you're running into some other problems about how film is loaded in those, and I could certainly do that. I could sacrifice some existing 4x5 holders and butt them up together, and to do that. But I really am thinking about a purpose-made 4x10 holder that we could start building other cameras around. So
yes, it's a great idea, and I also would love to see one that's also designed to take a glass plate that's 4x10.
Sure, and I think that we can do that because for one, the front registry on that is not going to be different.
Right.
The back, we can move. If we talk about the front of the holder, we can, move it back, or we can put the glass in the same position as we could put film and just make that a little bit thicker. Ethan has his self-developer. So you want to show that to everybody?
Yeah, so the deal is, I can make you a holder of any size, right? This is an 8x10 holder. It's kind of funny to load, and it's necessarily very thick because it's also a chemical tank, and it's a prototype that I've been working on. It's just black acrylic, and it's light tight and has raffle. But aside from this, right, I can make film holders in any size. They don't all have to be this thick. However, they do, given the materials that I'm using on a laser cutter, have to be thicker than a standard film holder. And the flange distance, or the distance from where the film holder mounts on the camera to the actual film plane, necessarily has to be thicker for me to use these materials, right? So if I could use, a fiber laser and cut thin metal and a router and, make three-dimensional shapes in CNC, then we could talk about, normal 4 or 5 or 6 millimeter flange distance inside of the film holder. But here, you basically just have to design a camera where, the focusing screen is back to match your particular film holder, which I think for a 4x10 is fine. So for this guy, an 8x10, I built a shim. So when you're focusing, you take this thing out and you put the shim in. It's like a big picture frame that's, this thickness minus the normal thickness of an 8x10 holder. And it puts the ground glass at the right distance. And eventually, when I build cameras for this particular thing, I'll just build the ground glass spring frame to match, right? It'll be very thick, this thickness, right?
And that's kind of what I'm asking to do. What I want to do is do that same thing, but I want to do the 4x10. And so,
given the fact that, to my knowledge, there's no ISO standard or ANSI standard for a 4x10 film holder depth, and nor are you going to pick one up. So you could really make it whatever you want, because it's not going to go in any other camera. It's just going to go in your camera, and you just build your camera around it.
Or it's going to go in any camera who buys one from you.
I could make them, but the deal is there's not going to be that many people making them. They're also, relatively expensive. So I have built this one entirely out of acrylic, which is not a cheap material. And it's not gold or anything, but it has a couple of disadvantages. One, it's more expensive than wood. Two, it's nice and light tight. The real reason why this is entirely acrylic and not wood is because it's a chemical tray, and so wood will absorb. Or I could spend hundreds of dollars finishing that wood and a lot of time, and it's just like the product becomes really expensive if I have to resin impregnate the wood after I cut it, yada yada. So this one is all acrylic. I would suggest doing a wood or composite wood and acrylic version. It would be reasonably cheaper and more shatterproof, and that's actually one of the reasons why I have not released this, besides having not finished the camera that it goes to. It would fit any camera, is that as it is now, it works fine. This prototype I used a whole lot, and eventually I kind of there's a little crack on this corner from dropping it, and it's not as durable. And I think I'm actually going to make it 1 or 2 layers of acrylic, maybe almost half or a full centimeter thicker, just to make it really durable. But you don't really have that problem with plywood. I would probably make it out of 1/8 inch birch ply, like furniture ply.
Sure.
Laser cuts pretty nicely. And then you may use acrylic for things like the dark slide or a rail that needs to be really smooth. But if you're not going to dunk the thing in chemistry, I think it makes sense to make a wood one.
Okay. And that tells me a lot. And I think we could do the rails. That's a big part of it is the rail.
Yeah, I mean the rails. So we could build rails and actually use, let's say, 3 pieces of film as a shim when mounting the rails, so you have the right thickness to slide film in. But if we're now talking about any thickness material, the way I handle it here is, instead of making the bottom open, which would let liquid leak out unless I had O-rings and all sorts of things, is I just have these magnets. These are, cheap neodymium magnets, and there's some magnets embedded in the back here. And then there's a little frame, right? So I just drop the frame. I put the frame on top, and then actually, I don't have to worry about, aligning the magnets. I just drop them in the general area, and they sort of pop into place here. Let's see one. It's in the right place.
Yeah.
Helps if you put
as it's falling apart.
Or you could build those magnets in. You could build those into the frame as well if you wanted to.
Right.
Make it even simpler.
Also, right. So I built the magnets into the back frame, but I could see if you were not, if you had extra space up and down, right? So I really wanted to make this fit into a regular 8x10 film holder, so anybody could use it on any camera with a shim for focusing. So I was limited this direction to this direction, and here to here, or at least this light seal to here. It could be a little taller this way.
Yeah.
But even still, if it didn't have to withstand chemistry, right, it could have a fabric hinge or even a duct tape hinge here, and then a magnetic enclosure here. And so you pull the dark slide out, flip this guy down, load the film in, and then flip this guy back up. I think that's kind of a reasonable way of achieving that.
So what's the thickness on that acrylic that you've got going there?
I believe this is mostly 3mm acrylic, although I might be using some. No, you know what it is? It's 1/8 inch and 1/16 inch acrylic.
Okay.
But in wood, I would think.
Is it? Yeah, I just wanted to know: it's opaque at 1/16 of an inch?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
But so is wood.
Yeah,
and
right,
and
right.
and if you're talking about making little slender guides for a slide-in situation, like for the dark slide, you could use acrylic, you could use aluminum, you could use grooves cut into hardwood. Like there's so many different ways to create that.
Yeah.
That part of it. So
I'm just worried about my craftsmanship on that.
Mhm.
Nick, what do you say about my craftsmanship?
your craftsmanship is fine. You just need to learn a few tricks.
That's not what he's told me.
Well, no. So if you want to cut a straight groove in a piece of hardwood, you need a fence on your saw. I mean, it's just a matter of setting up a jig or whatever. Yeah. And router tables can do a ton of precision, the easy way. So rough cut something out of any wood with a rough saw, and then just put a fence on a router table and slide that piece along, and it'll make it nice, rebate or whatever you want.
Okay. Okay. Well, that does help me a little bit. The other thing is I was thinking, at least for the first one, the body was going to be a box in box idea. I mean, one of these days I really am going to learn bellows making. I mean, I figure if Ethan can do it, anybody in the world can do it, right? But I want to start off with a box in box with focusing. And so I wasn't, on a ground glass. So I'm going to have to, for any holder I put in there, I'm going to have a ground glass holder. Just like the baby speed graphic that Nick was showing earlier on. So
we're talking about like a half-size version of this tailboard camera that I made.
Yeah, similar thing. It is going to be 6x10. It's going to be 4x10.
Right, so it's like half.
Right. So, but then later on, I'm going to probably want to have a front standard with some movements or something along those lines. I don't know if I don't think I could do a box in box with movements. I think that unless I just wanted to move the lens and I put it on some sort of ball turret or something. But any ideas or feedback or anything with that with the box in box design? Anything that I need to know?
No, other than, I mean, I've done it. It's a couple days job. You can do it. It's not so complicated. That being said, if you go to sell them, I'm already working on selling them when I have a laser cutter, which will be problematic. But
yes. No, you mean that we're going to have to fight over the market share? Is that what you're trying to say?
You're never going to own the laser cutter to do the job, and I can do it cheaply. I will be happy to make one, but like, okay, over here I have the Camerdactyl Cajon, which is an 8 version, right? But once I own a laser cutter, it's coming out up to like 16x20.
Yes, which I'm excited about because you can be my manufacturer for the kit.
We'll see.
So, yeah. I'm putting
get the laser cutter. I've been researching forklifts to take the thing off of a non-lift gate truck and put it down in my front yard, and then figuring out how to like caterpillar winch a 2,000-pound crate into my workshop.
I can help you figure that out. I've got a 10,000-pound machine I move around. Do you have a concrete floor? Do you have you can just roll it on pipes. It's pretty straightforward.
Oh yeah. So I mean, once it's in the shop, it's easy. It's got like caster wheels, but those caster wheels are too fragile to go over my driveway, which is like rocky concrete.
Right. So you need to drag it for that part, and a come along will do it fine. I've just moved a 2,000-pound stone that way with a come along, and pipes and a pry bar, and it takes some time, but you can do it. The other thing about that is that the forklift, it's just a matter of renting one. But you do depends on how rough terrain you may need to get actually a pretty huge one with a telescoping boom, in which case you can just boom it right into your shop.
Yeah, so I was thinking of using my van to pull it into my backyard and just putting it on some pipes, right? And like having a friend drive the van while I take the back pipe and put it into the front and do that. You know, it's a couple hundred feet at most. You know, I could spend a few hours just moving it there. And then like once it's next to the doors over here, I would uncrate it and then use the crate boards to form like a ramp and then just caster it from, you know, I think I could push a 2,000-pound machine myself over, you know, 4 feet of smooth ground into the shop.
And you could also create a couple rails with planks and put pipes on that to move over the rougher ground. So basically you make yourself a little choo-choo train arrangement.
Mm-hmm. That's smart.
I want to point out that this is Stonehenge technology, literally.
I know.
I love that.
Yeah, I move it
love
with an
Arduino.
Well, maybe enough if you get enough of them. Okay, so
yeah,
moving machines is fun. That won't be too bad. 2,000 pounds isn't really that bad. And it might be in the end, if you're renting a forklift anyway, it might be much simpler just to rent one that can do the whole thing for you.
Yeah.
Or
they're super fun. I mean, those boom lifts will go 45 feet out on the boom. I mean, you can do a lot.
Get it a day ahead of time and practice by moving your cabriolet around.
Well, I mean, I know how to drive a forklift.
Okay.
The last time I drove a forklift, I put a 5,600-pound, 9-foot-tall CNC mill in QLab, where first I had to drag a 3,000-pound machinist granite table out of the way, and then I mean that's not the problem. It's that forklifts are a little expensive to rent in the size
they are.
need. I would much rather just pay for a truck with a lift gate that could put it down, and then worry about, you know, because it comes in a crate, and even if I shred the bottom pallets of the crate, you know, I could probably just drag it with nothing across, you know, 100 feet of concrete with my van.
Yeah, that'll work. Just be careful.
Yeah.
I think that actually you should put it in the back of the van because you're going to move eventually.
It's way big. If I ever move, it's got to go on
you need a. I think all you need is a bigger van,
and there is no such thing. You'd need a box truck.
Yeah, okay, that's what it's called.
Yeah. I had a box truck when I moved down here, but I got rid of it.
Here's what you do: you just build a roof in your yard, and you get a flatbed trailer. You deliver it on the trailer, roll it under the roof, and go to work.
I mean, exactly what I would do is if I owned this property, I would drop a 40-foot shipping container, and I would move all of my production into the shipping container. In fact, I would buy a much bigger laser, and I put it in its own 20-foot long shipping container with its own air handling system, and I would just cut 4x8s. But you know, then every time you move, it's at least a $3,000 job to pick the container up and then drop it somewhere. Not to mention having to jack the machine up, remove the tubes, and crate it for shipping.
Yeah, pain.
I think really what you need is you need to put it in your dining room, and you know, and just have like a tablecloth that goes over it.
Okay.
And Ethan, I'm looking at your face.
Even if I removed the cabinets, it wouldn't fit.
I'm looking at Ethan, and I know immediately you want to do that.
Actually, there's a much cleaner solution, which is that you deliver it here, install it in my shop, and then you can operate it remotely, you know, with your little Arduinos and things.
That's true.
All right. Okay. So is there, Nick, let's talk about lenses for the 4x10. So it has to cover, I think for 4x10, about 200 millimeter circle. And what do I need to do? I mean, what's the best way to get into a lens for that?
So I have two lenses that would work that I like very much, and one of the reasons I have them is because they were at the cheaper end of the spectrum. And the first one that pops into my head is a Fujinon 210 millimeter. lens because it doesn't quite cover 8x10. It'll definitely cover 4x10. And it's nice. It's a nice angle of view. So I don't think you want a lens. The problem is that most lenses give you a big image circle by giving you a longer focal length. And one thing, I mean, I don't think you need a super wide angle lens, but it's nice to have some headroom. When you're going to make a wide shot, you don't want the vertical dimension to be too cropped down. So I think 210 would work really well. Would be a nice focal length to use. And it's it's a flawless lens for a pretty low price. I mean, I see them for, $150 or so on eBay all the time. And and they come in they make older ones in Seiko shutters, but you might as well just get a slightly newer one with a nice Copal shutter. I mean, you'll end up with a great high performing thing. It'll never disappoint you. You can find lenses that cover that much that are old and funky, but then you've got old and funky shutters. So it might be worth just paying a little bit extra to have a nice shutter. And like I said, the 210 or the 250 are common and not expensive. They're both really nice. Now, I'm sure there's other choices, but those immediately came to mind.
All right. Ethan, do you have any suggestions in that range? Cheap lenses that'll cover about 200 millimeters?
I mean, depends. I think the way I would use such a camera, I'd probably want like a 12-inch graphic Ektar, but those are probably $250 to $400. They're really nice. They got that old, sort of Hollywood 8x10 portrait look from the 40s.
Okay.
Big. And it's like a little longer than a sort of wide angle panoramic camera. But I kind of like it longer on cameras that I have to mount to a tripod anyway.
What was the focal length again?
It's 12-inch, so it's like 305 millimeters.
Right.
The other one that I was thinking of is like that Fujinon Joe uses. It's like a 240 Xerox Fujinon. I think
and the 250 that I bought for 8x10 is another really good one. And the 210. The Fujinon 210 would be my first choice because I like a bit more wider angle of view. And it's the perfect coverage unless you want movements. And it's just beautiful lenses.
Shutters.
Well, you can get those in Copal shutters. They're nice for pretty cheap. I mean, they come for the price of the shutter. They're really a good deal.
Yeah. I mean, Joe got Fujinon from like a Xerox machine, right? So the barrel is like that big. I made him a mount for it. It's like you're not going to fit it in any shutter. He made some crazy contraption shutter that I love, but it's down the road for me making shutters for cameras like that.
Yeah.
Right.
In the meantime, the 210 and the 250 come in beautiful Copal shutters that work perfectly. So that's a real advantage. And the 210, I think it goes up. It'll shoot up to a 400th of a second. So I mean, it's a very useful shutter.
One of the things that I kind of like the idea of the graphic Ektar because I'm figuring I want it to be as uncoated as possible because I'm using this blue X-ray film. And although from what I understand with blue X-ray film, it sees a bit into UV. So I might want to have a UV coating on it. But I think the uncoated lens might be the way to go on that.
Well, so if you go with the older Fujinons, those, I think you go to the oldest ones in Seiko shutters. I believe those are single coated. So you're partway there.
Okay. Yeah. So are there any other concerns that you got to think of as I begin to conceive of this? Anything?
You got it.
Okay.
It's gonna be good.
Okay, that sounds good. So here's another question about then if I were to send you some black acrylic, would would you be able to cut a little bit for me if
Yeah,
if I were to go that?
In fact, I will just sell you black acrylic at the wholesale price. I bought $1,600 worth of black acrylic the other day. Like, you're not going to get it cheaper than I'm getting it, and shipping is going to be twice what it costs. But yeah, I'll give you at cost. And
oh, cool. All right. Well, that is something that's coming up. I think we'd also tell the folks about our upcoming event on the 16th of July. So the 16th of July, we have decided
19th of July.
What is it?
19th of July.
19th of July. So nothing is coming up on the 16th of July. The 16th of July is just the 3-day warning for the 19th of July, when we are going to do the home camera show and tell show. Show and tell show. Yes. So
the Unconventional Camera Convention.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to have anybody who wants to participate. Now you will have to ahead of time. We're going to find a way of publishing the link. We're going to do it on Google Meets. So watch for that. We'll have to figure out how to do that.
I'm going to put it in their Facebook group. I will post it, within the week when I make the meet link, and then I will put up a reminder like a week before, and then for an hour.
We'll put up something in the podcast link a couple of days ahead of time, and we'll tell you where to go to get the link for the show and tell. So essentially, we want to see what you're doing. We want you to hold up the camera, homemade camera that you're making right now. Okay, well that's
you made a very nice camera there, Graham.
I made a very nice X Pro 2, the Frozen Photon X Pro 2. But yeah, we want to see what you're doing. So it can be something in works. It can be something in your as you are doing it. It can be a finished camera. If you want to do a little bit of a slideshow, that would be good as well. You can do it. You can do a PowerPoint. You can do a PDF. You can do it in preview or something else. But if you want to do a little bit of a slideshow, that's good. If you want to have a video running, I don't think we can have the audio feed through, but you can do a video. You run on your desktop, and then you just share your desktop.
That's bound for connectivity issues.
Oh, okay. So don't do a video, but
no videos,
but so slideshow or just showing the item. So we want to see what you're doing, and I think this is going to be a whole lot of fun.
A mic would be great. Headphones are really important. If you don't have headphones, you're going to step on everybody's audio. We can work it out, but we have to have you muted most of the time if you don't have headphones. You set up some tape lamps so you look nice and well lit, and more importantly, your camera is well lit. That would be great. Yes,
absolutely. So look, I hope everybody is looking forward to that. That is the 19th of July. It will be early morning in the U.S. It will be it'll be early afternoon for the U.K. When is that Australia? That's going to be late evening Australia, right?
Yeah, but it's a time that if you're up late in Australia or the middle of the day in Europe or early in the morning here in the States, everybody can be on. And, it's a little bit about showing us your cameras, but it's really about everybody meeting each other and showing each other your cameras.
In Hawaii, it will be in the middle of the night. It's going to be, 4 in the morning in Hawaii or something like that, 3 in the morning.
You can't please everybody.
And
that's right.
Those guys are in Hawaii, so they don't have any right to complain anyway.
You got a point there. So again, 19th of July for the homemade camera show and tell conference.
Graham, the Homemade Camera Podcast's Unconventional Camera Convention.
That's what it is right there. We want to thank Robbie Cribbs. He is the guy who has composed our music. He lets us use it. So thanks to Robbie Cribbs of Soundtrap Studios. Thanks, Robbie.
Thanks, Robbie.
Thanks.